Welcome to Mortality with me. Today we're going to be looking at cause of death, cancer, which is the number 2 cause of death for many years. And this is kind of a happy one. Let's see why. We're looking at the Society of Actuaries report on preliminary 2020 U.S. mortality experience. And when we look at cancer, we see from 2019 to 2020, the age-adjusted mortality rate decreased 1.7%. And we'll see later that the number of cancer deaths didn't really change. It was basically a wash. But it depends who died from cancer. So if fewer people at younger ages died from cancer. Now, of course, one of the reasons you can have fewer people dying from cancer is because something else killed them. But, we'll take a look at the data and you draw your own conclusions. Trying to just zero in on the cancer part. Okay, here we go. Cancer. Q1, 2, 3, 4. We've got our rates. Remember, these are 12-month moving windows. And if we take a look, every single quarter, the rate decreased. Okay, so let's take a look at the context of this in the 20-year trend by age range. And then we can take a look at the quarter over quarter for different age ranges. So there's a couple of things I'm going to want to point out to you with regards to the cancer mortality trends. Again, one of the issues with cause of death mortality trends is that you will eventually die of something. So that if you die old, something's on your death certificate. If something else kills you before, say, cancer can kill you, or vice versa, obviously you can see how that works out. So you can have an overall death trend in a certain direction, but sub-trends, that is, the causes of death, could be going in all different directions. This is the reason I'm pointing this out. If we look at the cancer mortality rates for let's just look at the 85 plus year olds, okay? Starts out at 1,800, so that's 1.8% of those 85 and older in 1999 died of cancer that year, okay? And that has come down to, well, I'm just trying to eyeball it, about 1.5%. So 1.8% down to 1.5%. Well, let us think, what happened with heart disease? If you remember from the prior video, heart disease went from about 6% for this age group, so 6% each year, not each year, but in 1999, 6% of those 85 and older died of heart disease in that year. And then we get down to about 1.8, so compare that 6% versus 1.8%. And then for heart disease, it came down to 4%, or under 4%, down, and here we have about, and again, I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and we'll see it in the table below, 1.5%. So we can already see cancer rates are lower at the oldest ages, considerably lower than heart disease death rates. So how did that age-adjusted mortality rate work out in total number of deaths? And what it is kind of the age structure of dying from cancer is very different from the age structure of dying from heart disease. Middle-aged people, cancer is a top cause of death for middle-aged people, okay? Heart disease crosses over with cancer at a certain age. I'm not going to figure that out right now. So you can see that a lot of the middle age, and they go down to 45 to 54 like they did with heart disease, You have to go between these two graphs. You'll notice, yes, cancer rates, death due to cancer has been decreasing. The trend has been good for cancer mortality rates for 20 years, actually more than 20 years. But the age-adjusted mortality rate hasn't been dropping as rapidly as the age for cancer, has not been dropping as rapidly as the age-adjusted mortality rate from heart disease. Now, heart disease is coming from a higher position, and I'm expecting in the next 10 to 20 years that cancer will be the top cause of death in the U.S. Okay. Anyway, we're trying to focus on 2020 though, so let's get into that. And we can see again, cancer's been improving for quite a long time. Let's take a look at the chart and table that goes along with this. If we actually look at the quarter-over-quarter changes, it's mostly negative, Q1 to Q2. Now, of course, it could have gone down because COVID killed off the cancer patients, and it was marked as a COVID death. That is a potential explanation. But we look into, and let me get away from that. Okay. So this is the problem, of course, when you're trying to record, and then Adobe Acrobat so helpfully pops up menus. In any case, when we look at Q2, actually and Q1, we have negative, so fewer people dying from cancer on all of our age ranges. When we get to Q3, it's a little bit of a wash. It's 0.0% for the 55 to 64 and the 75 to 84 age range, but it's still mainly negative. Basically, it's negative for each of the quarters, so it's improved. But again, is it because fewer cancer patients are dying, or because they died of COVID or some other cause, not the cancer? So if we go to the CDC dashboard and look at malignant neoplasms, which is cancer, we see the graph is flat, and these are weekly deaths. Let's try some of those hot spots I had done with the with the heart disease deaths. We'll start with New York City. Cancer does seem a little low compared to the prior year averages, but let's look at, say, New Jersey. It's pretty level. Let's look at California. It's flat. Let's look at Florida. It's flat. Let's look at Texas. It's flat. Okay, guys? So, things to think about with regards to cancer deaths. There is no seasonality to any of this. So, you can see, like with heart disease, especially heart attacks, not so much heart failures, but with heart attacks, there's a seasonality. If you did flu and pneumonia deaths, obviously there'd be a seasonality. High in the winter, low in the summer. Cancer deaths, totally flat week by week. That's been the history. That was 2020, and we're seeing it in 2021. I have heard various people pontificate? Theorizing, let's do that. That's easier for me to say. That we'll see more cancer deaths in years to come because people weren't screened in 2020. Well, maybe. I don't think so, and there's a variety of reasons why. Part of this, and this is very, very contentious, and you could say controversial as well. This comes up all the time when they talk about cancer screening for stuff like breast cancer and prostate cancer, because of course you get false positives for a variety of reasons, and I have this issue too. So you can get false positives if you have too much cancer screening, so you get a bunch of people who are spending on healthcare, and it's just a lot of stress, and they didn't have cancer in the first place. So that's one aspect. But there's a different aspect. Even if it's a true positive, the person has cancer, such as with prostate cancer. This is not as common with breast cancer, but with prostate cancer, if it's an older man, the man may die of something else if it had never been detected in the first place. This is not the case for Stuart. He was not that old, and it got into his bones, but a lot of men may have prostate cancer, but it's a slow-growing cancer, and heart disease or something else would kill them before they die. So this is very age-specific, and we're not seeing this here. We don't have a breakout by cause and age in this dashboard. The SOA, the Society of Actuaries, has tried to peel apart some of these statistics so that we can see where things are changing. But it seems pretty clear that cancer deaths were not really affected by the COVID pandemic. So that is our one piece of good news, as far as I can tell. And again, the only bad news that could come out of this is potentially the reason why cancer deaths were down was other things were killing cancer patients. Once we have the full data released to the Wonder database for the CDC, all the stuff I've been showing you is UCD, so underlying cause of death. You can have only one of those per death certificate. But as I have shown before, there is on average about 3 causes of death on a death certificate. So you have an underlying cause of death, and you have contributing causes of death. The underlying cause of death is that it's the but for. What's the but for? It's sitting on. No, it's that but for, say, COVID, they wouldn't have died. But for cancer, they wouldn't have died. It can be contentious on how you categorize it. The whole point of the death certificates and cause of death is how would you have prevented the death, or at least staved it, pushed it off to an older age. So once we get into the Wonder database, we will find out if some of the COVID patients had cancer, but when we've looked at comorbidities, cancer wasn't one of them, which is very interesting to me. It seems there's basically no interaction at all between cancer and COVID. So that was kind of interesting. Maybe there will be a long-term interaction, but for short-term, cancer's doing what it's doing. So the final thing to say about this, though, is what may happen in the long term is that the mortality improvement for cancer may slow in coming years. And we've already seen that in the SOA study for the 20 years. So something to think about. It's nice to mix in a little bit of good news along with the bad news. See y'all.